I'll kind of be walking through the product as if I'm sort of a brand new user, just to give you a sense of kind of what you'd expect. So right now we are a intelligent calendar assistant for Google Calendar. We operate through your Google credentials. Office 365 support is coming in the future. So I can just sign up with Google. And we typically recommend using your work email just because that tends to be, for a lot of people, their work calendars where a lot of the action is, like where a lot of the meetings are happening. And that's where we can kind of do our best work as far as blocking time. But we have plenty of users that are Gmail users or use their personal calendars. And as we'll show you in the demo, it sort of doesn't matter. We've built a pretty flexible system where you can like swap out the main calendar that Reclaim's using sort of mid-flight if you're decided you want to change your mind, or if you're changing jobs or whatever it might be. So we kind of tried to build this onboarding process for Reclaim that's really like simple. We really wanted to start by like front loading really simple things that we could do to just make your calendar like a teeny bit better in the first few minutes. Very first thing we do is kind of walk you through all of the various features of the product. We'll kind of give you a few notes on how we manage privacy and security. We have a full-time head of site operations who does an awesome job keeping us all in compliance and building out responsible security and privacy policies. And you can read about it on our security page, which is reclaim.ai/security. But the first thing we ask you literally is like, do you want to have lunch? We kind of start with like universal needs that we think everyone's going to sort of care about. And lunch tends to be something that, especially as we're working from home, we sort of often forget to make time for. And oftentimes we're okay with it being at slightly different times throughout the day. And so what Reclaim is going to do when you say yes to this is sort of block flexible time for lunch. And it's flexible in a couple different ways. And this will be kind of a theme that comes up a lot as we go through the feature set. You might notice in this animation, it's a little small, but you can see this lunch event not only moves to accommodate this project kickoff, it also goes from free to busy. And this is a feature that is in every calendar platform out there. You've probably seen free events in Google Calendar, most commonly if you like create an all-day event and it's marked as free time because Google Calendar knows not to take up all your availability. And what it really means is, will people see this time as blocked or will they not see it as blocked? And what Reclaim does is we not only try to accommodate those other commitments, we also kind of keep an eye on your calendar and try to see how busy things are. And so if we're looking at your calendar and we're like, you've got plenty of time to have lunch today and plenty of time within this policy, we're going to put the event down, but we're going to mark it as free. And that means that you're sort of open and available and sort of, people can book time over that slot. But as we start to see your calendar sort of filling up and you're running out of time, we'll mark the event as busy and sort of, publicize to others that, hey, this is kind of my last slot to do this thing. I won't go into too much more detail on this for now, but I wanted to kind of front load that as something that's just going to come up as we talk about really all of our time blocking features, because we make pretty heavy use of those free busy signals. So lunch is the first thing we ask you about. The second sort of universal need we'll ask you about is email. It's a pretty common thing for people to want to wake up in the morning and get to inbox 0, and then maybe at the end of the day, try to do the same thing so that you're kind of not, letting your email sort of snowball into an endless mountain. And so this is the other type of what we call habit that we'll block time for on your calendar as part of the onboarding. And then we're just asking you about your main calendar. So what calendar should we use to block time on? I'm going to pick the same one, the primary calendar for the email that I signed up with, but you can pick really any calendar you want. And as we say here, you can always change this later. So this is really like the main thing that Reclaim's going to use to look for my availability and block those lunch and catch-up habits. The next thing we ask you about is another fairly universal problem, which is this kind of problem you're probably familiar with. Like if you have a personal calendar and you've ever been overbooked because you had like a doctor's appointment on that calendar and you forgot to put it on your work calendar, you have lived this problem. And so what Reclaim will do is it can take events from any other calendar that you connect and push those events into any other calendar with flexible privacy. So I can show that I have a doctor's appointment, but I don't have to show that it's a doctor's appointment. I could even say things like, it's a personal commitment. You don't have to know that it's just busy or a doctor's appointment, but it's a personal thing. So maybe don't overbook it. I have a personal calendar I'll use here, or at least I did. I do, don't I? Yeah. And so here I'm just kind of picking which calendar I want to block events from. And then this is that privacy we were talking about. So I can do things like show them as personal commitments, show them as just busy, show all the details with a little more caveats. I'm going to pick personal commitment because that's my personal favorite. And then I'm basically done. We offer a couple of other features, and we're going to be building out this section over time that sort of lets you explore the product without actually diving into the UI. So there's all these sort of like little kind of, walled garden experiences where you can go through and kind of explore these features and turn them on. But I'll punt on this for now and just kind of dive right into the product. So the first thing I'll just kind of tie off here a little bit, since we set some of them up during onboarding, is what we call habits. So Reclaim sort of blocks time for a couple different types of objects. One are your routines, sort of the things you want to do regularly, and the other are tasks, things you want to get done by a certain date. In the case of habits, you can see these three that I set up during onboarding, and I'll pull up one just kind of as an example of how you set one of these things up. We have a number of defaults up here if you need some inspiration, and then of course you can create your own from scratch as well. But if I just go into lunch as an example, really what lunch is here is like almost like a set of rules for my calendar to follow. And so what I'm telling Reclaim here is I want to get lunch sometime between 11 and 2. Ideally, I'd like to eat at 12 because that's a pretty normal time to have lunch. I don't really want to eat for less than 25 minutes, and I don't really need more than 50 minutes. I'd like to do it Monday through Friday, and I'd like to do it on all of those days. I don't want to, just eat lunch on Tuesdays or something like that. There's a number of other advanced features that you can use for habits for things like, avoiding duplicate events. So if we see the word lunch on your calendar, we'll just skip scheduling that habit for the day. There's other little nifty things we put in here. But the core of this, if I hide those advanced options, is really just like, when do you want Reclaim to do this thing and how much time do you need? And so if I go into, I'll actually just go into Google Calendar, you can kind of see we have lunch sort of threading in flexibly throughout the week. You can see on Monday, it's at 12:15. On Tuesday, it's at 12:15. On Friday, it's at 11:15. On Wednesday, I don't have it at all because I have a team lunch, and I have that little thing that says, if you see the word lunch, don't schedule something here. On Thursday, it's at 12. So you can kind of see it's like it's really just flexible throughout the week. The other thing I'll just kind of call your attention to is you can see this little shield emoji here and this little free emoji here. What do those things mean? Well, shield means we've marked it as busy. And you can see that effectively we're like, well, you're kind of running out of time to get this thing done during the day and during the period you told us. So we're going to mark it as busy, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't get overbooked. In the case of Thursday, it's like, you've actually got like a good other hour of time here to get this thing done. So I'm going to put the event down, but I'm going to mark it as free. And you can see here, if I actually put down an event and call it, busy or whatever, in a few moments, this thing will flip to busy because we're going to see that, you're running out of time to eat your lunch. So you can kind of think of it as like, almost like a circuit breaker for your calendar, a circuit breaker for your availabilities. We kind of come in just in time and make sure that you get the time you need without blocking out your entire calendar and making you totally unavailable for meetings or other kinds of collaboration. The other thing that's neat about our habits, and this is generally true of all of our the times that we block, we're very responsive to user inputs. So this isn't like, oh, here's your plan, and if you try to adjust any of these things, Reclaim's going to fight with you. I can go in here and say, I want to eat lunch at 5 p.m., which is a weird time to eat lunch, but who knows? Maybe I woke up really late and I'm going to have lunch at 5 p.m. today. And Reclaim will just let you make that change, and it will actually treat that as like the new ideal time for it. So it'll start to it'll still auto reschedule it if conflicts come in, but it's going to really optimize around that time. So everything you sort of do in the calendar is sort of a signal to Reclaim. Even if it lets you do something or lets you kind of take an action, it's a signal to Reclaim that we sort of need to adapt your schedule for the day. And so this is really kind of the idea of Reclaim, is like you can work with these policies pretty flexibly the way you would any other time blocks on your calendar, and Reclaim will sort of respond to them. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Probably the next thing to talk about is our tasks. Tasks are basically like things you need to get done by a certain date. So really what you're telling Reclaim, and I can just hit C, or I can click that new task button and I can do something like, write a strategy doc. And I need 4 hours to write my strategy doc. I can tell Reclaim if I want this to happen during my working hours and my personal hours. One thing I'll just kind of show you is we have a concept in Reclaim of your working hours, your personal hours, and your meeting hours, and that sort of determines how Reclaim will schedule different kinds of events. But in the case of tasks, I can say, I want this thing to be done during my working hours, my personal hours, and then I just give it a range. I'm like, I need to do this between today and next Friday, let's say. I can also dictate how I want it broken up and add some notes to it, but I'll just leave that alone for now. And I can hit save. And in a few moments here, you will actually see that this thing got scheduled, and it looks like the first time block is actually for today at 4:15. And we automatically break up tasks that are longer than an hour into multiple time blocks. So, we'll kind of stretch it out over multiple days. Just like habits, we look at the due date of the task, and we use that as a way to determine whether it should be free or busy. And the reason in practice, you shouldn't really need to care about all this too much, but since we're talking, it's nice to be able to kind of walk through the system as a whole. You can see all of these task events right now are marked as free. And that's because I gave it a pretty far out due date, and Reclaim's looking at my time and it's like, you've actually got a decent amount of opportunities to get this thing done between now and the 26th. So I'm going to put this thing down and I'm going to mark it as free. If it's within 15 minutes of the event starting, you're going to see this thing flip to busy because we don't want you to get like calendar slammed at the last second. But the idea here is that this kind of leaves your time flexible. And you can kind of see this in action. If I go in here into the planner and view this as other people would see it, you can see that write a strategy doc time and the other time that got booked is just not shown here. And it's because to other people, it looks available. So it's kind of this little magic trick we're trying to do to your calendar. I can do things with tasks, like I can tell Reclaim I did them earlier. So let's say it was 2 p.m. and I actually finished my work on the strategy doc. I can just drag it to the past. And when I drag something to the past, Reclaim's like, cool, already done. I'll put a little check mark on it. You'll see here in a second, and we'll consider that time done, and we'll move all the other time kind of forward. So that's really the, sort of the core of how tasks work. We're building a number of integrations for tasks. Google Tasks was the first one that we built. The nice part about it is it's sitting right inside of Google Calendar, so you can kind of see your tasks side by side with your calendar events. I can do things like do important things for important people. And I can say like duration, 1 hour, due next Friday, type, work, and I'll just leave it at that. And so that's kind of the syntax that we're using. It's really duration, due, type, which tells us whether to do it during your working hours or your personal hours. And then there's also a field called not before, which is basically a way of telling Reclaim, don't try to schedule it before this date. And so in a moment here, you'll see we'll actually kind of strip away all this stuff that was in parentheses, and you'll see a task called do important things for important people.
The other quick thing to know, kind of adjacent related, if you do use Google Tasks, the Google Task integration to get tasks on your calendar, you can also you can make a task from a thread in Gmail. There's a add task button right in Gmail. And we have a special default for that one. We assume 30 minutes instead of an hour by default, and you can customize the hour default. You can actually do the same thing with Slack. If you install our Slack integration, you can click the little ... on the Slack thread and convert the thread to a task, and it does the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and on the topic of integrations, I'll just kind of quickly kind of walk through our mix of what is currently available in our roadmap. So Patrick mentioned the Slack integration. That's a pretty powerful way not only to control a lot of the stuff that Reclaim creates, your tasks and habits, but also to do things like we'll sync your calendar events to your Slack status, and we'll sort of do it by automatically determined categories. So your one-on-ones can have a different status from your external meetings, can have a different status from your personal events, and you can decide whether you want to set do not disturb for those events or just show your status, that kind of thing. So Slack is pretty cool if you've got the ability to install that. We do have a Zoom integration, which will, as it mentions here, it automatically updates your Slack status based on when you join or leave Zoom meetings. But more importantly, as we'll show when we get to Smart One-on-Ones, it also is a way for you to add, there are many ways to add video conferencing to your Smart One-on-One events. And then really a lot of these other integrations, except for Office 365, are really about other task managers that we're planning to start pulling in your tasks from. So Linear is the one that we just launched, and it will basically sync linear issues based on either a tag or a number of other kind of metadata that you can put on the ticket. And then the same thing with Asana and Trello and Todoist and Jira. So I'll give a kind of quick scan of like this area, because this is a lot of other little features that are just sort of helpful ways to keep your calendar in check. Color coding, this kind of gives you a peek into the different categories that we automatically detect on your calendar. These are defaults today. In the future, we'll have things like custom categories and ways to sort of segment your data however you want. By default, we'll only color code the events we create, but you also can opt to color code all your events, and you can pick from a variety of different colors. This is a useful thing if you're the kind of person who already color codes your calendar and you do it manually. It can be hard to keep up with, and it can be hard as like a process to continually implement, but it's a really useful way of like at a glance looking at your calendar and really trying to understand like what percentage of your time is going where. And so this is something that we do by default. I mentioned hours a moment ago. I won't belabor this too much because we'll get into it when we get into Smart One-on-Ones, but we're really trying to push this idea that there are sort of different time policies for your days. And right now it's working, personal, and meetings, which are all fairly generic. In the future, we can imagine things like focus time or my morning time policy or my bank hours sort of time policy where I want to get personal stuff done when businesses are open. And really some of this is inspired by like a lot of the kind of new flexible work and core collaboration hours concepts that we've seen spring up at a bunch of different companies that have gone remote during the pandemic. And this idea that like there are chunks of the day where you're doing different kinds of work, and that's okay, and your days should be flexible. So won't go into too much detail on this. And then there's a couple other little features in here. We can block time for you to travel from place to place. We'll block time for any event that we see a location on. And then for flights, we actually have a special bit of logic that will block 2 hours before a flight and 1 hour after. I'm going on my first flight in 2 years in a couple weeks. And so I actually get to use this feature again. And then decompression time, which basically gives you a little chunk of time after any event with video conferencing just to like take a breather and have a bio break or whatever it might be. We already talked about calendar sync, so I probably won't go too deep into that. And I think probably the most important other thing to show you is Smart One-on-Ones. So for a long time, like the last 2 years, we've really been focused on building like the best product we can for individuals to block time for themselves. Increasingly, as more and more people were using the product, and as we were seeing people sort of like their meeting load was increasing, the number of one-on-ones they were having was increasing because, companies are going remote, and part of the response to that is having more touch points and having more one-on-ones and trying to collaborate more. And they're just sort of struggling to manage all of them on a regular basis. And they're constantly kind of getting rescheduled and canceled, and it's a pain. And so we built this feature that specifically focuses on one-on-one meetings. And what it basically does is it will automatically schedule your one-on-one meetings with anyone inside or outside of your organization. And it will optimize around time zones, free busy time, as well as your mutual best meeting hours. So we'll automatically detect all the one-on-ones on your calendar. This is sort of a lame view of it because it shows a bunch of test events that are all with a man named Reclaim Test or a person named Reclaim Test. But you can see here that we'll automatically pull in all your one-on-one meetings. We'll pull in like how, the title of it and how frequent it is, and normally when it's scheduled, just to try to kind of like make it easy for you to take your existing one-on-ones and convert them. Here, I'm just entering in an email address. Both users have to use Reclaim in order to set these meetings up. We have a really nice short onboarding process that sort of invites the other person in. And once they've kind of gone through and set their hours, They don't, basically need to go through that process again. But the reason for it is like really that these are really powerful tools and really good, like we think a really powerful way to have your meetings, but it's really different. It's a new sort of concept, and we don't want to just like, bomb other people's calendars with weird meeting invites. We want to like give a little bit of context and make sure that both parties really understand what they're opting into. And more importantly, we want to make sure that we have confidence in understanding both users' schedules. And without having the other person sort of give us access to their calendar, it's hard for us to know things like time zone, free, busy, and then most importantly, meeting hours, right? We don't know which times are ideal for them to meet. So I'm inviting Patrick here. Patrick's already a Reclaim user, so this will be a pretty quick process for him. We sort of enforce conventions around, titles that we think are good, but if you want to give it a different title and call it, Patrick Henry Hangout, I can do that. There's descriptions for links to agenda. And then really this is kind of the meat of what I'm setting up here. So I can say I want to meet, 30 minutes is fine. I can say I want to meet on a weekly basis, every other week, monthly, quarterly. And the difference between this and like a recurring event is instead of saying like, oh, we're going to meet on the same Tuesday at the same time every single week, which might work some of the time, but oftentimes it has to get moved or it has to get overscheduled or changed because someone's on vacation. With this, Reclaim's really saying, let's just try to get you time every 7 days. And with monthly, it's kind of the same thing. Let's just try to get you time every 30 days. And so we're trying to kind of get away from like the rigidity of like a recurring event and really just focus on like, let's make sure you get time with this person on a regular basis. You can give it a start date if that helps, if it's something you want to kind of push out a little bit further. And then here we're just saying like, let Reclaim schedule at any time where you're both mutually available, where both of you have, overlapping meeting hours, ideally at this time, or you can pick particular times. If you're like, I only want to meet with this person on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I can go in here and say just Tuesdays and Thursdays, ideally on Tuesday, and give it a time window. So there's a lot of flexibility in here around the scheduling side of things. I mentioned that Zoom integration before. You can add Zoom to the meeting. You can also just paste in a video conferencing link. If neither of those options work for you, you can also create the one-on-one and then go into the calendar events that are created and edit them and add a video conferencing link there, and we'll automatically cascade it across all the events. As you'll probably see if you start using the product and you click the little Intercom chat bubble here, we're very responsive. We'll typically get back to you in Intercom says under 30 minutes, which is maybe a little too fast. And it'll be either Patrick or I, because essentially we're minus a couple of other teammates who pop in every so often. We're basically the support team and the founders. So anytime you run into an issue or have a problem, you can just send us a message and we'll help you out. Patrick, I'll send you this invitation and we can just kind of show maybe a little bit of the scheduling process. We won't go through the attendee side onboarding. I sent an invite to Patrick and he got an email. I can also just like copy this link and send it to him in Slack. You can see he already accepted it. And through the power of WebSockets, we are now scheduling. And look at that. I've got all these upcoming meetings with Patrick. I'm so excited to meet with him. I can go into Google Calendar and sort of, or I can go to our planner and sort of view one of these events. But kind of just like, habits and tasks, these things are flexible. So I'll look at one example of, where's me and Patrick? There it is, Patrick and Henry Hangout. So if I'm like, I'm busy right now, I'm guessing this is probably going to cancel it for the week since we're pretty late into the week. And I don't know if I think I might have limited my working hours a little bit or my meeting hours a little bit. But the idea is basically that if you book over this time or if you drag the event to another time, Reclaim's just sort of going to find the next best time. We also offer these little handy links in here where you can just click here if you want to reschedule it and just let Reclaim sort of manage it. You can click here if you want to cancel it for the week. Oh, look at that. It actually, it moved my habit around and said, no, you can still meet with Patrick at 3:30, which I'm not sure I actually want to do. And so, this is, I'd say the use case that we've seen most frequently for this, especially now that we're coming up on the holidays, is like vacations. It's really common for people to block out their vacations well ahead of time. And then as the dates approach, they're like, oh crap, I got to go reshuffle all my one-on-ones and move things around. And by the time they get to it, it's almost like too late. Like they've run out of other opportunities to go schedule it and they have to push it back further. So we help to kind of get ahead of that. You just block out a vacation event and things just.
Yeah. Henry, you should take Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off next week. So.
I deeply appreciate that. I think I totally should too. Cool. And it's going to be Spark is busy because this is an out of office thing. It's removing not only my one-on-ones, it's removing my habits and my tasks because it's like you're out of the office that day. And so I'm not sure where it went. I'm guessing it went out for that whole week.
We might not have had mutual time, but
I don't think we had mutual time. Oh yeah, that's right. This is using your actual work calendar. So it's quite possible the 22nd and the 23rd are very busy for you.
Well, I have a bunch of other one-on-ones that got scheduled that day because actual team members are out.
That's right. That's right. And that's probably, I'll kind of pause there. There's other little things, but that's really kind of the broad strokes of the product.